we're here with Martin, and Martin, you had a question about bug eyes as you're getting into the hobby. What were you wondering about?
Well, I'm trying to, I'm not a supercar guy, I'm a handyman, and I want to try to understand the level of maintenance on a bug eye, what I can do and what I should farm out.
Well, let me give you a quick rundown on this particular lovely green car, which we call Jean, and it's all beautifully restored. And so the luxury with this car is that we're starting from a nearly new condition, and we have the opportunity to just maintain it. It doesn't take a whole lot. I think the first thing that people who are new to bug eyes have to get over is the height of the nose. Of course, you have the bottom tip of the nose here, so when you're working under the car, it's quite a bit of bending. The flip forward noses make maintenance much more easy. But the main thing on these cars when they're set up properly is you have things like the oil filter here. Now this is a bit inconvenient because it's an old style canister filter, and you have to drop down this bowl and it can make quite a mess. It's sort of a tank with a cartridge filter in it. Not terribly difficult, it's just one bolt, but it's kind of sloppy. So there is a spin-on oil filter conversion that you can add, but this is the correct and original vintage way to do it. So that's your first line of defense, and that's usually about every 3,000 miles, and oil goes in here, the dipsticks here. These are, again, very simple little baby engines. This is 948 cc's. There's just not much to it. So there's your oil level, here's your antifreeze level, and again, this is a pretty small and simple radiator. Usually, if you have a telltale sign that there's a puddle under the car, that's going to tell you you need to do some maintenance. Something's leaking, then we have to find out where it's leaking. You know, you have fittings here for the temperature gauge, and these are very basic hose clamps. Usually this is all fine if it's been restored, but sometimes they weep or leak, and if you have a leak, you either have to change the hose, you have to change the hose and deal with it, really. As far as other maintenance is concerned, very basic spark plugs here, of course, just like on any engine, whether it's a lawnmower engine or a V8. And here's the distributor. This is also quite accessible and pretty simple. You have under here a pair of ignition, a set of ignition points. I don't know if you can see that right here, but it's very low-tech, old-fashioned stuff. Right. Believe it or not, this ignition rotor is one of the most problematic areas on these cars. Sometimes they crack and function irregularly. So we like to encourage people to carry a spare rotor, and if you've been around British cars, you know that's a weak link in the chain. As far as these points are concerned, these are opening and closing thousands of times every time you drive the car, maybe millions of times, and they get dirty and pitted, and sometimes they even break. Can you see them down in there? So the hot setup for that is to put in a breakerless ignition module. Watch your head as you get up too, Martin. It's something that we add. It's about $200 to purchase and then install and set it up.
And how is that different from an electronic ignition?
It's exactly what it is. Okay. It's basically upgrading the car so that instead of having points, it has an electronic setup that's much less prone to failure. We've had great results with those, and we put them in a lot of bug eyes, and really any British car can benefit from that conversion. So really the timing, which is set by adjusting this, is you really shouldn't have to adjust that once it's set up. And by changing to electronic ignition, again, you have a great improvement in reliability and just consistency. Here's the fan belt. Again, very basic and very simple. It's tensioned by moving this generator. Nothing like a modern serpentine belt, which is a royal pain in the neck. But on these, it's just 3 pulleys. Quite straightforward. Again, if you start with a good one when you buy your car and it's not cracked, you shouldn't have to deal with it for probably 5 to 10 years down the road. Here's another maintenance area for bug eyes. These are the lever shocks, this little unit right here. Whoops. And you can see when I flex the car that they work pretty evenly and uniformly. When they're bad, the car bounces like a pogo stick. To change these is 3 bolts and then 1 set of bolts on the front. It's really quite simple. You mail them in, they get rebuilt, you get new ones. It's just not a big deal. But again, probably every 5 to 10 years you'd be looking at something like that. Well within the reach of the home repairer, but also not difficult to farm out. And then here's the SU carburetors. These again can be a huge headache if they're not set up properly. On this car, every piece has been renewed. These have been rebushed and regasketed, and they work as good as they did when they were brand new. So there's really minimal maintenance. We adjust them, we tune them, we synchronize them, and there's no reason for them to go out of synchronization. You know, maybe every 5,000 miles you'll make minor adjustments, but they really should be fine. The reason SUs get a bad name sometimes is because when they're all worn and mismatched, they're a real bear to set up. If you start with them in great shape, you're good to go. The one thing they do occasionally need, I can't do it by hand because these are a little bit tight, which isn't a bad thing, but underneath this little gold screw, this brass cap, is a very small oil reservoir. And there's a little mark right about at this height. And you want to have just some oil in there which dampens the piston inside there. And that needs to be checked every 1,000 miles or so. Very simple. Unscrew if you have a pump oiler, a couple squirts of oil, and you're done. As far as this is one other key maintenance area. This is the master cylinder. And what this does, I don't know if you can see it in this light, but it's the single reservoir that drives your brake and your clutch system. So it's very important that you keep an eye on this, because if this were to drain out, you would lose either your brakes or your clutch. And these are a weak link on these cars. We usually sleeve them with brass and put in new rubber seals. Again, you're good for 5 to 10 years if you periodically change the hydraulic fluid. The fluid absorbs moisture, the moist fluid starts to corrode the system. Every 5 years you need to think about bleeding it out through the wheels, or even just sucking it out with a turkey baster and changing and putting in fresh fluid. So those are probably the key maintenance areas on these cars. Again, if you start with a good car, there's really nothing that needs regular attention other than routine maintenance to check and maintain the car in good shape as you drive it down the road.
How about brakes and suspension?
We'll do that in a separate video, and we'll pick up from there.
Okay.
And thanks for watching at bugeyeguide.com.